Some of us are constantly hiring, while others we're constantly developing. Some teams, they feel brand new every 6 months, while others feel stronger every year. So, what is the difference? It isn't talent, it's not going to be pay, and it isn't luck. It's our mindset. So, in this episode, we're going to break down the subtle leadership thinking that quietly creates short term teams and the long term mindset shift that turns a revolving door into that stable, high trust culture that we're all striving for. Welcome, everybody, to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. I am your host, John Espinosa, and if it's your goal to build high performance teams, I'm going to use my 20 years of leadership experience to share what I have learned. So, why does it matter? Most of us don't intend to build short-term teams, but our decisions, they signal short-term thinking. So today we're going to discuss why leaders unconsciously think short-term, 3 behaviors that create disposable teams, and then the long game leadership lens for those of you that want to build teams that will last through any challenge. So the first topic we're going to talk about today is why we default to short-term thinking. And it's not because we want to. What I've found, most leaders, it's the pressure. It's the pressure that's put onto us. And there's 3 forces that we're going to talk about. These 3 forces I've seen across large organizations and small organizations, large teams and small teams. So they're not unique, but they are unique to the fact of what they cause. And that's that short-term thinking mentality. The first one is this urgency bias. And what I've found whenever we have an urgency bias is the loudest problem, the squeakiest wheel, that becomes the priority, not the most important. So this urgency bias, again, that pressure's on us to perform, and what happens? We default to getting that squeaky wheel out of our sphere, out of the way, but it's not always the most important. The second one, survival mode. So here, when we are overloaded, when we become to the point where really we're just optimizing for relief, not for results. And when we optimize just again to get things out of the way, just some type of relief to stop the bleeding, we don't always get the results. It's like putting a Band-Aid over a gunshot wound. Yeah, it may cover it up, but guess what? You're probably still going to bleed out. So the results aren't there. It's kind of a morbid way to look at it, but that's what organizations do. They bleed out because they're always focused on the survival mode. And when you get into a survival mode, anyone who's been there understands you're just looking to put those Band-Aids over those gunshot wounds. The last one is performance anxiety. And we want these quick wins to feel in control. I was talking to somebody today, and they were saying leadership is boring. Like when you have gotten to a place where you're comfortable with yourself, with your team, you have processes, leadership becomes boring because you get things out of the way. You're behind the scenes. You're not necessarily leading out front, but what happens when we get this performance anxiety, we want to get these quick wins. And it makes us feel in control. It reminds me of mowing the grass. I still mow my lawn. Why? Because it's a quick win. I see immediate results. That's what we do. Translate that into something in the business where we have this anxiety to perform. It's this force, and it shifts us into short-term thinking. We lose track of the long-term goal, and we get that quick win just to feel good about ourselves or make the team feel good, when if we just pushed a little bit through that challenge, now we're into long-term strategy and we're moving on down the road. So those are the 3 forces. And the result here is that we manage performance week to week. Does it feel like every single week you're just managing or trying to get to Friday? If that's the case, it's short-term thinking. What else? We reward speed over sustainability. So get it off your plate, get it done. Doesn't matter whether it meets the long-term mission. It makes you feel good, right? Does it sustain the organization? Is it sustaining the team? So those three forces, that's the primary result is one, we reward speed over sustainability, and we feel like we're managing performance. We're just trying to make it to Friday. But when we think short term, this is the really, for me, this is where I found myself. The behavior matches. So what I think is how I behave. And we find this very frequent in organizations that have a lot of pressure. You got a lot of deadlines. Maybe you're in a market where it hasn't been very good this year, so you've created a lot of pressure, not just for yourself, but now what you've done is you've projected that onto your team. And we're going to talk about why behavior creates short-term thinking and what that behavior looks like. The first one, hiring for immediate relief. How many of us ask ourselves, who can help us now? Instead of who can grow with us? I recently worked with an organization and they were going out, they were filling a hole for a 20-year veteran with the company. Now that's a lot of years. So imagine that 20 years of corporate knowledge, it left a big gap in the organization. They were plugging holes that this leader didn't even understand. Hey everyone, a quick break in the episode today. Are you struggling to find and keep the right employees? You're not alone. High turnover drains time, money, and morale, leaving us frustrated, overwhelmed, and feeling like we have to settle for less. I understand how tough hiring can be because I've lived it. And with over 21 years of building high-performance teams, I know how to turn hiring challenges into lasting employee success. Through my proven lead framework, we're going to analyze your processes, design a personalized strategy, and implement solutions that create confident and long-term results. Don't let turnover hold you back. Choosing this program is that first step towards a thriving workplace. Enroll today at thejohnespinosa.com and build the team you deserve. Imagine a team that works seamlessly together or keep facing the same costly cycle of turnover. The choice is yours. Now back to our episode. And when it became very painful, guess what happened? They filled that spot with somebody who was been in the organization for quite some time. But what happened? They were stuck in their ways. There was no way that that individual was going to grow with the organization. It was just an immediate fix. And that's a behavior that we need to watch out for. That seeking immediate relief is a behavior that feels good in the short term, but doesn't sustain the organization in the long term. The second one, coaching when things break. Coaching, actually, I would caveat that only coaching when things break. And when we act reactively and not developmentally, the team, what they do is coaching becomes a correction, not growth. And when they feel like they're being corrected all the time, or you're looking over their shoulder, just waiting for that shoe to drop, so that way you can go in and correct, or worse yet, go in and save the day. Again, that's a behavior that we need to change. Notice whenever you are only coaching when things go bad or when things break, that's where we need to take a time out and look for other opportunities to coach, not just when things are going bad. The third behavior, treating people as roles, not as trajectories. And what I'm talking about here is when people feel like resources, not investments, they begin to behave that way. And when you have somebody who feels like they're just a pawn in the game of chess, now they begin to only do what they're told when you tell them to do it. You lose creativity. Your trust begins to erode. All of these things happen when we begin to behave in this short-term mindset. When I'm looking for immediate relief, when I only coach when things break. And guess what? When I treat people as pawns in the culture in our organization, bad things will happen. So these things create short-term teams. What can sustain a team? What are the things, John, that you have seen that sustain teams? So as we begin to move forward and look at the long-term game, there's a couple leadership lenses that I want to focus on. Refocus. Whenever we begin to feel ourselves thinking short-term, behaving short-term, we have to look through a different lens. And the first lens we're going to talk about is, who is this person becoming? There's two questions here. What skills am I developing in them? And what future role could they grow into? I had a team that, again, had a very seasoned employee decide to retire. And that employee was one deep, not a lot of backup. In the areas that they were backing up, there wasn't a lot of process documentation. And so there was an individual on the team that I found we had been developing them along the way. They had the skill set, and that skill set wasn't necessarily the technical skill set, but they were critical thinkers. They knew how to be curious, and they were willing to learn. So they grew into what the role was, and they began to make it their own. But by asking, who is this person becoming? Who are those individuals within your team and within your organizations that you see growing? And sometimes we have to help them grow. I was one of those. I was never a person to necessarily go out and say, hey, I want that job. I want that position. It was, I look back at my career and it was always a great leader encouraging me to take that next step. So sometimes we as leaders, as business owners, have to go out and encourage people to take that next step. I needed somebody to see that in me. There may be individuals out there that see that in themselves and aren't afraid to tell you about it. But in the end, lens that we need to look through is, what's the future state of this individual, right? Who is this person becoming? Lens 2, we need to optimize for capability, not convenience. And two questions here. What is going to help us build capacity and capability? Because capability creates scale. When we create and build capacity within our teams, and what I mean by this, a prime example, cross-training. If you have an organization, especially a small organization, and they're very unique positions within your organization, what happens when one of those positions decides to leave, retire, or get sick? Now what you've done, you have single points of failure within your organization. And I try not to have single points of failure within my organizations. So what do? I have to create capacity. And by creating capacity, that looks like cross-training. It's not that this individual can do everything that this other individual can do, but what it means is this individual has an awareness and an understanding of what their peer does, just in case that individual decides to leave or whatever the case, gets sick. If they have to take off a week or two, are you one deep to where you can't even, keep the ship afloat? Those are areas or where we can build capacity as leaders. So the first two lenses were employee focused, we're team focused. This last lens is going to focus all on the leader. And this lens is all about designing the leader that you want to be. So anytime you add something to the business, anytime you add something to your plate, to your workload, I need you to ask yourself one question. Is this making me replaceable or is this making me essential? And by answering that question, it's going to tell you how much work you're going to be needing to get done in the future. Because if the work is making you essential to the organization, what happens when you get sick? What happens when you got to take a vacation? The goal is to make ourselves replaceable, and that's a hard pill to swallow. We talked about that on the last episode, about ways, techniques that you can make yourself replaceable. So go back, take a listen on that episode. But here, it's a lens that we have to look through in order to get to the long-term gain. So one of the key goals out of all three of these lenses is to plant ourselves out of the center, is to make sure that we're not the single point of failures as leaders, and that will translate into long-term success. So when you shift your mindset, that does, well, one, employees feel invested in. Trust begins to increase. The learning, it shoots through the roof. Retention, it will stabilize. In teams, they compound instead of reset. So when we extend our time horizon, teams, they stop feeling temporary. So here's the challenge. Look at your team today. Are you building for the next 6 months, or are you building for the next 6 years? Because your mindset, it already told them the answer. Today, we talked about that short-term pressure that creates short-term teams, the 3 behaviors that quietly signal disposability, and the long-game leadership that's going to build our lasting team. So great teams aren't built by urgency. They're built by intention over time. If you're ready to make the shift from constantly rebuilding to constantly developing, join one of our programs today. Let's build teams that grow stronger every year. I believe in you. Go be great. Talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye.